The rich CEO was ready to leave the final blind date, until she said, "You once helped my daughter." Alexander Hale sat in the dimly lit corner of Le Chateau, the upscale French restaurant overlooking the glittering skyline of New York City. At 45, he was the epitome of success, a self-made billionaire CEO of Hale Enterprises, a tech conglomerate that revolutionized AI-driven healthcare. His life was a meticulously orchestrated symphony of board meetings, private jets, and high-stakes deals. But tonight, he was here for something far removed from his empire, a blind date, his final one. He had sworn this would be the last. After a string of failed relationships, women drawn to his wealth like moths to a flame, only to burn out when they realized his heart was as guarded as his penthouse, Alexander had lost faith in love. His sister, Elena, had set this up, insisting he give it one more shot. "You're turning into a recluse, Alex," she'd said. "Meet her, she's different." But as he glanced at his Rolex for the third time, he regretted agreeing. The woman was late, and his patience was thinner than the silk tie around his neck. He sipped his scotch, the amber liquid burning a familiar path down his throat. His mind wandered to the empire he'd built from nothing. Orphaned at 18 after a tragic car accident that claimed his parents, Alexander had clawed his way up, fueled by sheer will and a refusal to let vulnerability creep in. Love, it was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not after watching his ex-wife walk away with half his heart and a chunk of his fortune 5 years ago. The door swung open, and a woman entered, her presence cutting through the murmur of diners like a gentle breeze. She was in her early 40s, with warm hazel eyes and auburn hair cascading in soft waves. Her dress was simple yet elegant, a deep blue that complemented her graceful poise. She scanned the room, her gaze landing on him. With a tentative smile, she approached. "Mr. Hale, I'm Sophia Reynolds. I'm so sorry I'm late, traffic was a nightmare." Alexander stood, offering a polite handshake. "Call me Alex. No worries. Please, sit." As they settled, he assessed her quickly. Sophia was attractive, but not in the flashy way he was used to. No designer labels screaming for attention, no rehearsed charm. She was a high school teacher, Elena had mentioned, widowed with a daughter in college. Ordinary, safe. But Alexander's mind was already plotting his escape. He'd endure the small talk, order dessert to be polite, then plead an early meeting. The conversation started predictably. "So, what do you do?" she asked, her voice soft and genuine. "I run a tech company. I for medical diagnostics." "Boring stuff, really," he deflected, steering away from details. "And you, teaching history, right?" "Yes, at Lincoln High. It's rewarding, seeing young minds light up when they connect the past to the present." Her eyes sparkled as she spoke, but Alexander nodded absently, checking his phone under the table. The sommelier arrived with wine recommendations, and they ordered, a Cabernet for him, a Chardonnay for her. As appetizers arrived, escargot for him, salad for her, Sophia tried to draw him out. "Elena says you're a workaholic. What do you do for fun?" "Fun," he chuckled dryly. "I climb mountains. Literally. Everest Base Camp last year. Keeps me sharp." "That's impressive. I've always wanted to travel more, but life, well, it gets in the way." She paused, fiddling with her napkin. "My husband passed away 10 years ago. Cancer. It was sudden." "I'm sorry," Alexander said, his tone sincere but distant. He'd heard variations of this before, tragedies shared to forge instant bonds. But his walls were up. The main course came, filet mignon for him, salmon for her. He cut into his steak, the knife gliding effortlessly. Sophia sensed his detachment. "You seem like you're somewhere else tonight. If this isn't working, I understand. Blind dates can be awkward." He met her gaze, surprised by her directness. "Honestly, I've been through too many of these. I was about to make my excuses and leave." She laughed lightly, not offended. "Fair enough. But since we're here, tell me something real. Not the CEO version, the human one." Alexander hesitated. Something in her eyes, kind, unjudging, cracked his armor just a fraction. "All right, the truth. I'm tired. Building an empire means sacrificing everything else. Friends, family, love. It's lonely at the top." Sophia's expression softened. "Loneliness isn't reserved for the top. It's universal. But sometimes, a single act of kindness can change everything." He raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a Hallmark card." "Maybe, but it's true." She took a sip of wine, her voice dropping. "You know, Alex, you once helped my daughter." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Alexander froze, fork midway to his mouth. What did you say? Sophia leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. You once helped my daughter. Lily. It was 8 years ago, at Memorial Hospital. The name triggered a flood of memories. 8 years ago, Alexander had been at the peak of his ascent, his company on the verge of a breakthrough in cancer detection software. But personally, he'd been reeling from his divorce, drowning in work to numb the pain. One rainy evening, he'd visited the hospital for a routine check-up on a prototype device. In the waiting room, he'd noticed a young girl, no more than 12, sitting alone, tears streaming down her face. Her mother was in surgery, she'd whispered when he asked if she was okay. Her father had died recently, and now this. The girl was terrified. Alexander, moved by an impulse he rarely indulged, had sat with her. He'd shared stories from his own childhood losses, bought her hot chocolate from the vending machine, and even pulled strings to get an update on her mother's condition. The surgery was successful, a benign tumor removed. As the girl hugged him goodbye, she'd said, "You're like a guardian angel." He'd brushed it off, leaving an anonymous donation for her family's medical bills before vanishing back into his world. Lily, she was the girl in the waiting room, Alexander murmured, his voice barely audible. The restaurant faded around him. Sophia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. That was me in surgery. Breast cancer scare. We were barely scraping by after my husband's death. Insurance covered most, but the extras. And then, out of nowhere, the bills were paid. Lily told me about the kind stranger who stayed with her. She described you perfectly, tall, dark hair, a sad smile. I never knew your name until Elena mentioned your story tonight. It clicked. Alexander's heart pounded. I didn't do it for recognition. She reminded me of myself at that age, lost, scared. But you did it anyway. That act of kindness saved us, Alex. Not just financially. Lily drew strength from it. She said, if a stranger can care, then the world isn't so bad. She's studying medicine now because of you, inspired to help others like you helped her. He set down his knife, emotion surging. For years, he'd convinced himself that vulnerability was weakness, that his empire was his only legacy. But here was proof otherwise, a ripple from a forgotten moment, washing back to him in the form of this woman. Why didn't you say this earlier? He asked, his voice thick. I wanted to see the real you first. Not the hero from my daughter's story, but the man behind the walls. Sophia reached across the table, her hand covering his. And now I see him. Flawed, guarded, but capable of incredible goodness. The dam broke. Alexander felt tears prick his eyes, tears he hadn't shed since his parents' funeral. I've spent so long building barriers. Afraid to let anyone in. It's okay, she whispered. We all have our scars. But maybe this is fate's way of saying it's time to heal. They talked for hours, the food forgotten as the restaurant emptied. Alexander shared his fears, the isolation of success, the regret of lost time. Sophia opened up about her grief, her joys in teaching, her pride in Lily. For the first time in years, he laughed genuinely, the sound foreign yet freeing. As the night deepened, they stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The city lights twinkled like stars brought to earth. Alexander turned to her. Sophia, I was ready to leave. But now, I don't want this to end. She smiled, that warm, genuine curve of her lips. Neither do I. Let's take it slow, one step at a time. He walked her to her car, their hands brushing. Before she drove away, she paused. Call Lily sometime. She'd love to thank her guardian angel properly. Alexander nodded, a lump in his throat. I will. Back in his penthouse, he stared at the skyline, the weight of his solitude lifting. That blind date wasn't just a meeting, it was a reckoning. A reminder that true power wasn't in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the quiet acts that touched souls. Months passed, and what began as tentative dates blossomed into something profound. Alexander met Lily, a vibrant young woman with her mother's eyes and an unyielding spirit. Their reunion was tearful, filled with gratitude and stories. He became a fixture in their lives, attending Lily's college events, sharing holidays with Sophia. But life, ever unpredictable, tested them. 6 months in, Sophia's cancer returned, aggressive this time. Alexander mobilized his resources. Experimental treatments from his company's labs, the best oncologists flown in. He was there for every chemo session, holding her hand as she fought. One evening, in the hospital room, Sophia looked at him weakly. Alex, if I don't make it, you will, he interrupted fiercely. We're in this together. She squeezed his hand. You saved us once, now let me save you, from your loneliness. Miraculously, the treatments worked. Remission. As Sophia recovered, Alexander proposed on a mountain hike, symbolizing the peaks they'd climbed together. Marry me, he said, kneeling with a ring that sparkled like her spirit. You've shown me what real strength is. Yes, she whispered, tears of joy flowing. Their wedding was intimate, with Lily as maid of honor. Alexander's empire thrived, but now with purpose, funding cancer research in Sophia's name. He learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was the bridge to connection. Years later, as they watched their grandchildren play, Alexander reflected on that fateful blind date. A moment of kindness, forgotten by him, had circled back to rewrite his life. In the end, the richest man wasn't defined by his wealth, but by the love he gave and received. And it all started with a simple act that proved, in a world of chaos, compassion was the ultimate power.